Dynamite Deka would be volume 26 in the SEGA Ages 2500 series that would see a release for the PlayStation 2 in Japan, and this game would be a ground up remaster of the original game that was seen in the arcades and would later be ported to the Sega Saturn in the mid 90s in other regions under the name of Die Hard Arcade, where the goal is that you have to save the president's daughter from various killers and terrorists using various weapon types, but also utilising hand-to-hand combat, as this is essentially an old school beat 'em up game that took many influences from the likes of the iconic Streets of Rage series that would also have been very, very popular within Sega's lineup of games at the time, going back to the likes of the Sega Mega Drive. And this game as well, originally back on the Sega Saturn, would have been one of the earlier 3D beat 'em up games that would have been released on any system, and the game proved to be extremely popular, not just on the arcades but on the console as well, as the Sega Saturn version sold quite highly in numbers with regards to the copies of the game that were sold in stores, and it genuinely is a fun game to play. So you can play through a variety of different missions, and kind of like in typical, like say, Die Hard style, like even based off of like the movie. And even if you've played Die Hard Trilogy, especially the first game in that series that was on the likes of the Sega Saturn as well and the PlayStation, you have to progress through different floors of a tower block building while engaging and defeating a variety of different enemies and bosses while trying to defeat the main enemy at the end of the game itself. So you can play through the campaign with either one or two players, so you can play co-op with your mates, which would be typical of these style of beat 'em up games, and was made popular with iconic games such as Streets of Rage 1, 2 and 3, and even the Golden Axe series that were extremely popular during the days of the Sega Mega Drive and Genesis. And this game itself is really cool. Mind you, to get used to the control systems can be a little bit on the clunky side for many, especially back in the day, but those that could master it would have had one of the best arcade experiences that you could have had on a home console at the time. And that was the thing about the game. For its time, it was considered to be one of the best arcade ports of any game released on any system during the mid 90s. So it was only inevitable that at some point the game would see a full ground up remaster with better graphics and more fleshed out controls and features, and this game definitely does that. It utilises the power of the PS2's graphics engine and power for the time, and it truly is an epic experience, but it doesn't take away from the iconic elements that made the original game so memorable. It just has improved visuals, but it still has all of the real fast paced, crazy and insane elements that you'd be familiar with the original game. It just is a fun title overall, and it's definitely a good addition to your collection if you're a fan of beat 'em up games. This is definitely one of the best 3D beat 'em up games that's ever been created, in all honesty, and this updated version is a very good excuse to go back and to revisit all that nostalgia. Even for myself personally, I remember seeing like loads of TV spots and videos and even reviews back in the day of Die Hard Arcade, and everybody used to rave about it. You used to see it always covered in games magazines such as Games Master back in the day, and you used to always see it on TV shows all the time. It's always been played. So inevitably I managed to buy myself a Sega Saturn years later, because it was the one console that I never had owned growing up, because I'd owned, and myself and my brothers had owned loads of different consoles. So when I did manage to get it, I managed to get Die Hard Arcade. Now at the time, considering the pricing of games today, I managed to get it for about €40, which was dear at the time, but it was considered cheap now compared to the price of the game now. Now I still have my copy at home, and I do dig it out from time to time and play it on my Saturn console, and it's such a good game. Yes, it's fiddly, it's clunky, it's tricky, but it's just absolute mayhem. It's just chaos. Now I know the fact is that this game would later go on to be kind of known as Dynamite Cop in Japan and even in the arcades, but again they just used the Die Hard license for the Sega Saturn. But I think that's what helped the popularity of this game to reach new heights. The fact is that it had such an iconic movie name tied to it. It just helped with the popularity of this game, and that's why it is considered to be one of the best beat 'em ups and even 3D beat 'em ups of all time. It's just a fun game. It just gets so many elements right. It is really fast paced elements, really good combat mechanics and martial arts style moves, and it's just, the gameplay is just fun, fast and frantic, and that's all you need in a game like this. So it's definitely a classic in all regards, and it just still is just as fun today, and it captures all of the same elements that would have been seen on the arcade and even on the Sega Saturn version, but just with updated visuals. So I highly recommend whichever version of the game you have, or if you've yet to play it, go and play it, because it is an awesome game and it is a true classic in every sense of the word. And genuinely, if you are a fan of beat 'em up games, you have to play this game. It is definitely one of the best of them that you can experience for sure. And I would love to know your thoughts of Dynamite Deka, or in most cases Die Hard Arcade, for the PS2, or even if you played the arcade version or even the Sega Saturn edition. I'd love to hear whatever stories you do have of this iconic game, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be updated with future videos. And if you would like to see more content on the channel around other types of beat 'em up games also released on the PS2, then you can check out the playlist on screen to see more of those games in action. And I will see you all in the next one.